since I'm using an on-point layout, there's extra space on the edges of your row that you fill in with setting triangles. And those need to be cut from oversized squares so that they fit alongside the rows that are already complete. So I grabbed my large ruler. I usually just recommend 3 basic rulers: the small 6.5-inch square, the long 6.5 by 24-inch ruler that I use for cutting long strips. The smaller one is used for cutting the smaller pieces in your quilt. And then I generally use a 12.5-inch square. That's a pretty standard block size. I can do most of my trimming with that. But it is nice to have a larger square on hand for when you're doing these larger blocks. Like for these setting triangles, I'm working with a 15.5-inch square of fabric, and I need to cut it twice on the diagonal. So I've got my square laid out, and this is one of the few times that I do use, sorry, I'm finding a good place for my ruler. This is one of the few times that I do use the lines on my cutting mat. In previous videos, I recommend that you measure from your ruler. So if I'm cutting a 3.5-inch strip, I'm not gonna line up 3.5 inches on my grid and put the ruler here and cut. That's backwards for me as a right-hander, but I also get a more accurate cut when I'm working from the ruler. The guidelines on the ruler stay much more consistent than your mat that may be affected by the temperature in your house, being placed on the floor on a seat. You know, sometimes these things can get warped. So I generally don't recommend using those grid lines, especially to measure. But one of the nice features is these diagonal lines that come in that are printed on the cutting mat. And I need to cut this oversized square down into triangles. So I'm going to cut twice on the diagonal. And to help me get a nice cut, I'm going to place my square so that each corner is on one of those pre-printed diagonal lines. Then I can take my long ruler and line it up from corner to corner. You could do this on the straight grid lines, but as long as there's an X printed there, I can cut on one diagonal, turn my ruler to the other diagonal, and I don't have to worry about shifting fabric. So I am going to slice once on the diagonal, line that up the other way, and cut twice on the diagonal. Now I have my setting triangles, and they will be placed at right angles with my row of blocks to complete the quilt. So I'm going to stack those up and cut my corner triangles. I've done all the math for these pieces using Bonnie Hunter's website. And I'm just kind of measuring here if I can get what I need from some of my other scraps of fabric. And this one is long enough, so I will use that piece of fabric. I'm going to again get my oversized ruler. This time I only need 11 inches, so I could get by with my smaller square, but since this one is handy, I will go ahead and use it. And when I'm cutting off the selvage, I leave about 1/2 inch of the fabric there just to make sure that I've got plenty, you know, I've gotten all the different weave fabric out of there. And I said this was gonna, so then I turn it around so that I'm making a nice fresh cut. cutting 11 inches. So I was saying that Bonnie Hunter has some great resources on her website, quiltville.com, and that's where I scrolled down to the on point settings and double checked what I needed for this quilt for the setting and corner triangles. Great resources. If you have not explored Bonnie Hunter's site, you'll want to do that. And for those quilting purists out there, quilt police, yes, I know I'm in violation. This fabric just came off the bolt. I was too anxious to get started sewing. I haven't pre-washed. So you can see that fold line from where it was sitting on the bolt. Most dedicated quilters would run an iron over that. I hate the iron, so I save that for other times. And how did I get, I'm looking at my two pieces and they're not the same size, so which one is right? That one is 12 inches. So that can easily be trimmed back down to 11, and that 1 inch scrap will go in my crazy quilt box of scraps. And like I said, I'm not going to worry too much about that crease. I don't like to iron. I don't want to turn the iron on. My room's a little bit warm today. Don't need the extra heat. So yes, like I said, write me the ticket, quilt police, and I will gladly pay the fine. My quilt, my rules. So working on this square. This time, these are for the corner triangles, and we only cut once on the diagonal for those. So the same process. Big ruler gets in the way. I could line it up on those diagonal grid lines. Again, you see you can just kind of slide it up and down and tilt it a little bit so that the points are right on those. But since I only need one diagonal, I'm going to show you what I meant about using the straight grid lines. I have lined up, I'm using one straight line on my mat that's going from point to point, and you can hold one end and adjust, slide the other one around so it's straight. So we are cutting once on the diagonal, then I grab my long ruler and line it up right on that grid line and cut. And now I have the corner triangles, and I will be sewing the block to the long edge. So the corner triangles are a little bit different than the side triangles. They work out to about the same size when you're looking at them, but the position is different. This one will sew the block straight, and walking to the other side of the room, getting my demo all set up. So these are the corner triangles, so they'll go on the corner there. And yes, we're oversized. We're going to be able to trim that square. Then the side triangles will sit like so. On the short side will be sewn to the block there, and then any excess will be trimmed off. And that one, like I said, that looks huge next to that block. I may have been overly generous when I added, but I'd rather have my quilt pieces too big and be able to cut them down to size than have them be too small and not work. So we would have to put some, you'll work with your pattern and lay those blocks out and sew the setting triangles, short sides, corner triangles, long side to the blocks, and build your quilt top from there. So The next time you see me, I will have a quilt top to share because I am going to get busy on that. I just wanted to show you the setup there with those diagonal grid lines and the various size rulers that I use to cut my quilt blocks and my setting triangles for an on-point layout. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for watching this video on adding setting triangles to the rows of our Dancing 9-patch quilt. Please click the link below where you can see the other videos in this Dancing 9-patch playlist. And remember to click the button to subscribe and ring the bell so you're notified each week when I bring more video and quilting tutorials to you. Thanks so much.